Steve Ridge became a certified private investigator years ago, solely to look into Jodi's disappearance. Over the last 2 years, we've spoken to him about the significant findings that he has uncovered in this case. More than anybody who has been willing to share details publicly in what has become a 26-year mystery of important public interest. Steve Ridge joins me now from his home in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. There is a mystery man none of us knew about all these years, Steve, and now you have uncovered this. So what is the latest with this? And you've spoken to him.
Well, I have, and I will tell you that it has taken me months. I have, from the beginning, I have surmised that there was probably someone in this equation who had not been identified or ever mentioned by authorities. And I did discover months ago that there was an individual who I tracked down out of state, and eventually, after numerous communications, was able to secure an in-person interview with this individual. I am not naming them because I think that having them publicly identified could, in fact, disturb an ultimate prosecution in the case. This would be a key witness. And the essence of this is an individual who met Jodi for the first time on June 17th of 1995, some 10 days before she went missing. They became very fast friends and were in communication on a daily basis, twice daily basis, many days before she went missing. They went to dinner. They had drinks together. They played golf together. And as I said, they spoke to one another as many as twice daily in those final days. So this was a real whirlwind relationship that developed, and it was not widely known. I do believe that Jodi had every intent of telling her friend Kelly Torgerson about the relationship when she tried to telephone her the night before she went missing, but she did not connect with her, only spoke with her husband, and therefore I think this information has been elusive in terms of the general public.
There was a message on Jodi's answering machine from this person who you're talking about. What do we know about that message?
Well, I was able to confirm that this person was contacted by police the same day that Jodi went missing, and that they thoroughly interviewed him, perhaps interrogated would be a better term, and that he was so shaken by the experience that he called Jodi's message machine and left a telephone message imploring her to be in touch with him or with the police because they were looking for her, and he was very concerned about her whereabouts and her safety.
Do we know where this man was living at the time? Was he from Mason City? Was he from out of state? You said vacationing?
He was from out of state. I'm not naming the location at this juncture either, but definitely not the state of Iowa. He was, however, visiting a residence of a relative of his, which was located on Clear Lake. And that was where, at least on one occasion, Jodi took her Mazda Miata and parked it in his garage, or that family garage, while they went to dinner. So, you know, I've gotten a lot of very, very fine specifics around this relationship and been able to verify it with multiple sources. I will tell you that I believe that law enforcement is well aware of these details and have specifically chosen to withhold them because they're concerned about his ability to be a witness and about a potential prosecution in the case.
Okay, so I was wondering why, if police knew about him from the very outset of this investigation, why we hadn't heard anything about it. We've heard about so many other persons of interest, and then this then begs the question, was there somebody who could have been jealous that Jodi had now a new relationship?
Well, I think there definitely was a motive for jealousy. There were people who had aspirations around Jodi, an infatuation perhaps. I don't think until you actually solve the crime and identify the perpetrator that it's appropriate to speculate about anybody in particular, and clear them or presume that they are somehow guilty.
Okay, Steve, can you hang with me a couple minutes? I got to take a quick break. We'll come back, and I've got a few more questions for you and see what direction this goes now from this point. So stay with me. We'll be right back. I'm continuing my conversation now with private investigator Steve Ridge, who joins me from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And Steve has been looking into the Jodi Huisentruit case and has uncovered more than any of the other sources that we have talked to. You have been more open about things that you have found in this investigation, Steve, than we've gotten even from police. And how much do you think that this mystery person who had a relationship with Jodi 10 days before she went missing will lead to something more significant? Because the thing that people want to know the most is, when is a suspect going to be arrested, and how close are we to that?
Well, I think this information, this individual, is foundational to a potential case of prosecution. There's no question. I mean, I sort of see it as the centerpiece of a very complex puzzle. And I think that the reason this individual's never been identified publicly is that this person's never been known to anyone but the primary investigators that worked on the case. I confirmed that with him. He says he's never spoken to the media or any other private investigator. He's only spoken with authorities. And we have detailed those conversations, when they took place, where they took place, the fact that he was asked to take a lie detector test, but that his attorney had advised him not to do so. He also confirmed for me that his garbage or trash weekly pickup was picked up by apparently authorities prior to the garbage company or city coming by to obtain that trash. So we know that obviously this relationship did exist. I've confirmed it in multiple ways, and I think it is going to prove to be very foundational to any potential prosecution in the case.
So since police never released that he was even in existence, this man, nor that obviously then that he would be a person of interest, does that indicate then that police don't find him guilty of having anything to do with her disappearance, but that, like you said, he could then become a potential witness when they do get somebody in custody?
I think it's more likely that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that his relationship, quickly evolving a relationship that lasted only 10 days, was pretty spontaneous and circumstantial. I think there was a lot more work done than has ever been given credit, because the authorities have chosen to keep this information to themselves. They feel as though this type of information, if it gets out in too much detail, and let's say if this individual were to be identified, that it could put him in jeopardy, or it could put other individuals at jeopardy. I do think there are still people, a handful of people with information about this case, who have chosen not to speak out, not to come clean, not to come forward. And the only way I've found you can get people to talk is if you go to them. That was the case with John Van Cise. It was the case with the individual who believes they destroyed some critical evidence, pivotal evidence in the case that I was able to...
A piece of that critical evidence was Jodi's car being removed from the scene on the day that, was it the day of or the day after she disappeared? That car could have had a lot of evidence in it, and that was removed. And that seems strange even to this day.
It does, and I think that obviously even the police chief has said that he sort of regrets that happened, although it was not on his watch. But I will tell you that I don't think necessarily that there was going to be evidence in that car that was going to solve this case. I think it's more a matter of other people having information or having peripheral involvement. And I think that a potentially prosecutable case may still exist if a few more people are willing to talk.
Steve, we've talked in the past, especially before Dustin Hunk, and a known drug kingpin down in that area, said that he had information, and then he was executed for his crimes and another unrelated drug crime. But so there was the possibility that Jodi could have known that there was some people involved in drug-related issues down there, and that could have been a big contributing factor in her disappearance. That's not ruled out. And could this mystery man know some of this? Maybe she told him stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the backdrop of drug activity in the Mason City area was so pervasive that it touched so many people, so many lives. There were so many people that had their personal situations at stake that it has perhaps sort of overshadowed the fundamental, what actually happened, just because there are so many potential cover-ups that exist around this case that really have nothing to do with the primary, abduction of Jodi, but might shed light on these other issues if the case were to be solved.
Steve, as always, I appreciate your time, your insight, and letting us know about this.
Absolutely.
We'll be back.